718-937-6666. The phone number, let's go to Joe in Saddle River. You're on Mets Extra, Joe.
Hi, Howie. How are you this afternoon?
Okay, how you doing?
Very good, thank you. Very good. First of all, if Darryl Strawberry was still here playing right field the way Yubi's been playing it, he would be crucified.
We said that a couple of days ago, too, that if that were Darryl, you would hear louder and more intense booing than probably ever heard before at Shea Stadium. I agree with you.
Unbelievable. Howie, Frank Viola, got to be signed. I mean, here it is now. We're into almost June. The man is 6-2. He won a huge game today. I mean, today was a big, big win. Mm-hmm. Probably the biggest win of the year so far for the Mets. And, Frank's going to let him walk. Frank's going to let him walk. I mean, it's unbelievable. I hate to keep harping on this point, but you've got to sign this man. This guy is forget about arguably. To me, he's the top left-hander in baseball today. I don't think there's any question. The guy, whatever bone chips he had in the off-season, it still hasn't seemed to have affected him at all. He's an intense competitor. He's a tremendous pitcher. The man has got to be signed.
Well, you certainly don't have to convince me about that.
I realize that.
You know what I thought the turning point of the game was, and it pertains specifically to Viola. Sandberg on first base in the 6th inning. Viola took about a half hour working to mark Grace. Now, we've seen a lot of pitchers lose their concentration throwing over to first base any number of times, and if Viola or anybody was ever going to lose concentration, today was the day because it was hot, it was humid. If you had the TV, you could see the way they were struggling, not so much in terms of performance, but just in terms of trying to stay reasonably cool. Sweat was pouring down, and it was a very, very difficult day to stay in rhythm because of the heat. So here's Viola perhaps exacerbating that kind of problem by throwing over as often as he did, but he was on a mission to keep Sandberg close.
Absolutely.
I think he did run him with Bell 2-1, and Bell fouled it off, but Sandberg was never able to get a real good lead or any kind of a threat, and yet Viola was able to maintain his focus to Grace, and he ends up striking out Grace. And we've seen a lot of pitchers spend so much time worrying about the guy on first base, they lose the hitter at the plate. But Viola fought through Grace, Bell, and Dawson, and I thought once he got through that inning, they were home free, even though it wasn't until Hojo hit the home run in the 7th that they even went ahead.
Well, Grace usually eats up Frank, too.
Uh-huh.
He hits him very hard. Howie, one last point I want to make here. The situation with Jeffries. McReynolds again today. He had the hot week or whatever, the 10 days on the coast, whatever he did, and then one good game on the first game at a homestand, the 8-6 win over the Cubs last week.
Yeah.
The guy's doing it again. He came up today he hit a hard line drive with a runner, with a runner at second and 2 out, didn't get the job done. He had 2 runners on in the 8th inning, couldn't do it again. Again, he hits his usual pop-up. What does
that have to do with Jeffries, though? You mean
well,
the
point is, we have to make a decision. I feel Tommy Herr has to play second base every day. My feeling, okay, with this team the way it's structured now. Either let's get rid of Jeffries or let's put Jeffries in left field and do something with McReynolds.
Right, it won't happen during the season.
You don't see it at all,
I can't. Can you imagine Greg Jeffries going out to the outfield during the season with all of the pressure that he feels, however justified some of those feelings are? Can you imagine how severely multiplied those feelings would be by having to go to the outfield in midseason, having never played it before?
Well, let me ask you this, Howie. Let me ask you, your opinion. Is Greg Jeffries, do you feel that Jeffries, the way it is now, is he going to make it here in New York? I mean, your gut feeling.
I'm not going to bury him at the age of 23.
No, I agree with that.
I can't project how he's going to mature. I can't project a personality change. But I'll tell you this, I've always felt that with Greg Jeffries, if you can get him away from thinking about defensive problems and just worry about his hitting for the most part, he'll be more effective. So down the road, I'd like to think that if he's playing in the outfield, specifically left field, he'll spend less time worrying about defense, and hopefully that'll translate into better performance at the plate. But I can't see them making that kind of move during the season. Something to keep an eye on, though. I appreciate the phone call. It's 549 718-937-6666. Let's talk about it, though. It's 718-937-6666 with Joe in Saddle River. You're on Mets Extra, Joe.
Good evening, Howie. How are you?
All right. How are you?
Good to talk to you, as always. Howie, a couple points I want to make about tonight. First of all, even though the season is done, really an outstanding, very entertaining game tonight. It's nice to see this team has a pulse.
Yeah, that was the most impressive part of it to me, the fact that there was some life there.
No question about it. It was very nice. A couple other things. They showed a stat tonight on Channel 9 that coming into tonight's game, that the Mets were 51-0, leading after the 8th inning. I know I know stats are stats, but that's a pretty interesting stat, really.
Well, you think about it, though. I mean, what are you supposed to do? If you have a lead after 8 innings, all you're looking to do is get 3 outs, and that doesn't necessarily mean you've got a 1-run lead. So, you know, if someone were to show me a team that were, say, 44-7 at the end, or with the lead going into the 9th inning, you know, that might look like a pretty decent stat, but to me, that's lousy.
That's right.
To blow 7 games when you have the lead going to the 9th inning tells you you've got real closer problems. And
Franco's done a good job, really, all year, in spite of that ridiculous 0-2 pitch he threw tonight. But he's done pretty well closing them out when he's only been used in the 9th inning with a lead.
Yeah,
and he's only been used in the 9th inning with a lead.
Earlier on, he was victimized by some bad luck, too. Or need I remind you about the flying bat that almost conked Dave Magadan, which cost the Mets a game in St. Louis?
That's because Mr. Viola blew a 5-0 lead in that game, but we don't want to rehash that. My main point,
if you want.
No, my main point for calling tonight, Howie, was Sid Fernandez. You know, when is the Met management going to say, hey, Sid, it's time to drop the weight? This is this man's problem. His injury problems, his stamina problems. He's 40, 50 pounds overweight.
Well, I don't know about 40, 50, but he is significant. Well, he's significantly overweight. I don't have an exact number on it because, you know, he's pitched effectively at a rather heavy weight before, but there's a cumulative effect, you know, that all that weight takes on the knees, and that's what's bothering. You know, it's not an arm problem. It's a knee problem. And, I mean, I'm not a doctor, and I talked to Jerry Hunsaker about it on the pregame, and he's not a doctor either, but I don't think you have to be Ben Casey to figure out that all that weight in the upper body is gonna really put a lot of pressure on those wheels.
Well, the guy's making $2 million or whatever a year. Hey, come on. Let's say, hey, Sid, you know, you want to pitch in the major leagues, you're going to lose the weight, or you ain't going to be here next year. You know, really. And the same thing with this Julio Valera. I mean, come on. I mean,
you know what? I mean, with Valera, it's even more frustrating because here's a guy who seemed to be on the verge of a major league career, and he's eaten himself all the way down in past Tidewater. Who knows? He probably, although Jerry Hunsaker wouldn't commit to this, won't be up next week, which is kind of surprising. Now, maybe that'll change if Sid's out for a little bit longer than anticipated. Dwight Gooden's not going to pitch Tuesday. You know, Sid may not miss another start. We don't know. I just as soon see a bunch of the kids up here anyway, because that's the fun of September when you're out of the pennant race looking at the rookies.
We may be looking at Wally Whitehurst's final start tomorrow also.
Conceivable, sure.
You know? And as always, let me leave you with, and I will always do this from now on until it happens, hopefully, please sign Bobby Bonilla. Good night, Howie.
All right, take care. Anyway, to the phones, and Joe in Saddle River. Hi, Joe, you're on Mets Extra.
Howie, how are you? Good evening.
How you doing?
Good tonight. Howie, a couple points, First of all, I just want to, you know, it's an incredible feat what Howard Johnson has done. I mean, 30-30, when you think that only himself and Bobby Bonds have done it 3 times or more, is incredible.
And how dumb was that by the official score in Pittsburgh not to give him the stolen base until after the game?
It was ridiculous. It was absolutely ridiculous. But I just wanted to, you know, Howard deserved his due for that. Getting to the managerial situation, I don't know if you remember, we spoke a couple months ago, and I said at that point, Buddy should have been fired, and Cubbage made the interim exactly for the reason to give the guy a good 2 months, you know, of under maybe, you know, a little pressure, and see what the heck he can do.
Well, that's the least that they could have accomplished. I agree with that. I mean, I thought, and I said so at the time, he should have been gone during that disastrous road trip.
Absolutely.
After the disastrous West Coast trip.
Absolutely. But now only giving him a week, Howie, I feel they have to go out of the organization and bring in some kind of a strong personality here. I would really love to see Dallas Green. I mean, personally, I'd love to see him. You know, I hear Jeff Torborg. I guess that's an impossibility. You're ever going to get Jeff Torborg for the White Sox.
If there's any way to get him, he shoots right to the top of the list, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. I mean, he'd be terrific. I'll tell you another guy I wouldn't mind seeing. I guess it's beyond possibility, but Davey wouldn't be bad being back here.
It never happened. It would never happen.
I know, even with cashing out of the picture.
And you know what? I don't think he'd necessarily be the right guy for the job anyway, because, you know, the club would look at that in a very strange way. I say the club meaning the players.
Right.
You know, they would look at that as almost a circular move, if not a circus-type move. And I just don't know that would really accomplish anything. You know, understand one thing about Davey. When he had the club in '84... well, specifically '84.
Right, they were a young team on the rise.
Yeah,
really.
but I mean, just so that Davey doesn't get unfairly pigeonholed here, they didn't have Hojo, they didn't have McReynolds. Strawberry was a second-year player. They had precious little power, and Davey was creative and aggressive, and he squeezed and he hit and ran, and he did a lot of things to try and build runs and create offense. And then and Carter hadn't been there yet, and then they go out and get Carter and add ultimately Hojo and McReynolds and. they become a power-laden team, and so Davey sits back and waits on the 3-run home run, and everybody says that's the only kind of game he can manage. Well, that's not true, and so, understand that when you think of managerial alternatives or managerial possibilities, don't simply look at the type of game that they managed with any one particular team, because a smart manager, and I think Mike Cubbage said this today with Mike and Chris too, a smart manager is going to do the best with the talent that he has. You can't come in with a preordained or a predestined approach to the game and be inflexible about it and expect players who can't necessarily live up to that theory or those philosophies to play accordingly. I mean, you've got to be flexible. You've got to react to the players that you're given, and I think Davey Johnson did that a lot better than he was ever given credit for, but he's not coming back, and I don't think he should come back. It's time to move on, and so be it. And we'll talk more about it at 718-937-6666.